Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin.
Rob, I think you should put on pants. That and...
They're never going to know that I'm recording in my underwear. If I'm going to record...
accidentally get up for something and then like...
No, if I'm going to record, I'm going to be comfortable.
I want people to know that you're a heathen.
I am not a heathen. I am a comic book fan. We're two distinctly types of people. This is what I put up with.
Yeah, a woman who likes to clean up the house. God, must be terrible.
Well, I mean, you know, that's what women are supposed to do anyway, right? Keep the house clean. You knocked down my vape, really? It's kind of broken a little bit now. I have been up since like 6 o'clock in the morning. And honestly, I've been working on this since the end of Avengers Endgame, right? Like since the movie came out. And what I've been trying to do was find a way to bring the X-Men and the Fantastic Four into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the next 2 phases, and then end phase 6 with Avengers versus X-Men, right? Like, I've been trying to find a way to do this, and I think I have it figured out. Okay, so here's we talked about this in the last video, right? Like Avengers Endgame leaves off in such a way to where there's so much world building they can do. One of the feelings it gives you is like they could stop making Marvel movies now, and then it would be like, so this was a fun journey, and then like that's it. And like we never get a comic book movie from Marvel again. We know that's not gonna be the case. They're gonna make movies forever. Like they can. That's one of the things people don't understand. With them basically owning all the rights to all the characters except for like the Incredible Hulk and Namor the Submariner, who I think currently are owned by Universal, they can basically make movies like forever, like for hundreds of years if they wanted to, because there's so much content to do. Big stories, small stories, all that kind of stuff. I mean, like Acts of Vengeance can basically be like a whole series of movies unto itself. For those of you guys who don't know, Acts of Vengeance was a story where Loki went around and grabbed all the supervillains and then basically pit them against all the superheroes. So think like Old Man Logan, except it didn't work. And that's basically what Acts of Vengeance is. Now, my thought is, okay, this really begins in phase 5, right? Because phase 4 is kind of like, it feels more like the interim phase, right? You could set things up, and we talked about that, you know, setting up Secret Wars, things like that. But really phase 4 was more just kind of like, here's some movies that are there. They're movies we always meant to make, and they're sequels to movies that we need to make because the first one was so popular. But like, you could do phase 4 and it doesn't really lead into anything, right? Like it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just like, it's equivalent to like the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of like an intermission between like major story arcs, which I wouldn't be surprised if they did that later on down the line. But this picks up with phase 5. Now phase 4 is supposed to last 5 years, right? So it's like, okay, so 5 years from now, we start rolling the X-Men over to the MCU. Now I know that Feige and all of them said it'll be at least 10 years, but I'm jumping the gun and saying we're gonna go ahead and like, we're gonna swing for 5 years and see what happens. So the first movie we get is Wolverine. And there's the reason for that is because it's Wolverine, right? Like everybody wants to see Wolverine. That's the thing. Like I would argue that Wolverine would probably be the most successful, or at least the highest grossing Marvel Cinematic Universe movie behind Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. I think it would even do better than Black Panther, because the one question, the reason why people are gonna go see it isn't necessarily because it's Wolverine. They're gonna see how the Hugh Jackman replacement does. They wanna see like, is this guy gonna be as good as Hugh Jackman? So if for no other reason than to like critique it and complain or to love it, but everybody's gonna go see it because Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. So it's like, you replace him with someone else. Now, I think it would be even more successful if they had Hugh Jackman, right? Like if they had Hugh Jackman in the MCU, I think it would do even better. But the basis behind this first movie, whatever the plot, whatever the main plot is, the takeaway from this movie is that it basically gives us the origin of mutants in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, you can build on this with the Eternals film that's coming out in phase 4, right? Like the Eternals film can basically show the Eternals coming to Earth in the early days of humanity, taking a subsect called the Wanderers, basically like the missing link between primate and man, and then basically say like, okay, like one third of the group was, their genes were modified, they became deviants, which are basically trolls. Another third had their genes modified, they became the Eternals, which are basically angelic beings. And then the third group, you know, the other third, had their genes modified, and somewhere along the line, they will activate, we just don't know when. And that sets the ground level for like later on down the line, however many thousands of years later, mutants will pop up. What this does, and you can even tie this into the Black Widow film, right? You could say, okay, Wolverine was part of Team X, which was basically this covert, wet work Black Ops team that was ran by the CIA, and they were designed for like taking out enemies and doing all kinds of crazy things. You can even tie it into the War on Terror if you want to, I don't know. But nonetheless, you could tie it into a whole host of like modern day events, and like Black Widow served alongside them, or like they worked alongside like a SHIELD, like you literally had like a SHIELD group, a SHIELD detachment that went in, and SHIELD did their own thing or did whatever it was. They were designed to basically be like a distraction, so Team X could sneak in and sneak out, nobody would know they were there. And like Black Widow was the one who was like talking with Team X saying, here's what we're gonna do. You can tie those things in. Team X, of course, being like Wolverine and Sabretooth and so on and so forth. But then basically you say somewhere along the line, Wolverine is taken and he's thrown into like Weapons Plus or whatever the case is. But like when they're experimenting on him, they discover a gene that when it's activated gives him powers, and then he basically develops a healing factor. And so that leads into the origin of mutants in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because what they do is they take that gene, they synthesize, the activation process, spread it across the world, voila, you've got the mutants population that just kind of rises up seemingly out of nowhere, right? So for those of you guys who follow the Inhumans, think Terrigenesis, like the event of inhumanity, like during Infinity when the Terrigen bomb was detonated. Think of that, except applied to mutants, and Wolverine is the catalyst, not the detonation of a Terrigen bomb by Black Bolt when Thanos was beating the hell out of him. So from there, you jump from the Wolverine film. The second movie you make is New Avengers. Now, New Avengers doesn't really tie into anything per se, right? Like, it doesn't really bring in the X-Men any further than they already are. You might have a post-credit scene or something like that. What this does is it helps to world build. What I would do here with the New Avengers is I would take the first story arc of Brian Michael Bendis, The Raft. For those of you guys who don't know what The Raft is, The Raft actually laid the groundwork for Secret Invasion later on. But The Raft was a storyline where Electro, the Spider-Man villain, was contracted to go into the Raft, which was this super secret, not really a secret prison, but it was this prison designed to hold like the worst of the super-powered criminal offenders. And then in turn, he took down power to it, and that allowed all of them to escape. And so the New Avengers basically formed in response to that as a means to like track down these various villains and bring them in. So at the time that comic came out, the New Avengers consisted of Captain America, Iron Man, like, I don't think Luke Cage, maybe Luke Cage was part of it, I don't remember. I know he was there during the Raft event, and he actually ended up being taken over by Purple Man, who tried to get him to kill everyone. It had Spider-Man, it had Wolverine, it had a handful of people here and there, but it was a whole new roster, right? Like New Avengers. The reason why this world builds is because what you can do is you can say some event takes place, some prison is broken into, or whatever the case is, but all these villains escape, and you introduce villains that didn't exist before, right? Like they were captured and they were thrown into a prison sometime between the movies, and so we never really saw them because they were never a main plot. Or you could say like, this is what the New Avengers have been doing between the time that like, the team formed at the end of Avengers Endgame and the time they exist now. There's a lot of things that you can do, but you can add in things like maybe we get a new Iron Man, maybe like Shang-Chi, because we know Shang-Chi, the master of martial arts, is getting a movie in Phase 4. So maybe Shang-Chi joins the New Avengers. So you throw him on and we see him more often. What it does is it solves the problem of trying to create a sequel, and it just throws him onto the New Avengers team, and that's really all the exposure that he needs and gets. The alternative to that is to put Shang-Chi on Heroes for Hire, but as far as I'm aware, Misty Knight and all those characters, they all exist on the Netflix side of things. They don't exist in the movies, so I don't think there's any real crossover there. From there, we switch to the third film. Third film is the Fantastic Four. Now, again, when it comes to all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies in Phase 1, they were all basically origin stories, introduction films. This is no different. The team basically forms, and it doesn't need to be a huge drawn out point of the film, right? Like, we talked about that in Black Panther 2, how you can have this sort of lead up. You can do the legwork ahead of time before the movie that introduces the Fantastic Four and shows like everything that's going on. The opening credits to the film is like the opening credits to The Incredible Hulk, the story of how the Fantastic Four became the Fantastic Four. We got that in the Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton. The story of how Bruce Banner became the Hulk is covered in a 2.5-minute credit sequence, and then the movie picks up. You do the exact same thing here. And then what ends up happening is the team basically fights against Doctor Doom. Now, the reason why this is important is because what this does is it sets the stage for the power-hungry nature of Doctor Doom. We'll come back to that, why it matters, here in a minute. But basically, that like Doctor Doom is this being that he will always try to acquire absolute power, right? Like, it's one of the things that Hickman established in his Fantastic Four run, but it always kind of been an on-running theme in the Fantastic Four comics, is that Doctor Doom will always try to do whatever it takes to gain absolute power. His thirst for that level of ability, that level of power, is unquenchable. He'll never have enough. All right, from there, you switch over to the next movie, the fourth movie, which is Deadpool. Who cares what the plot is? It's Deadpool in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It'll put butts in the seats. Now, from here, you switch over to the fifth film, the X-Men. And this is gonna be cool because what the X-Men does is again, you basically have like a 2.5-minute intro sequence that basically like shows the X-Men forming, whatever the case may be, but the result is that you basically have the team face off against Magneto. Now, it does seem like a lot to do, right? Like to introduce the team, to give us the basis behind why the team exists, to in turn like have Magneto pop up, explain the whole backstory to him, and then have the team face off against him, but not really. Like it was like in Iron Man, they covered all that, right? Like Tony Stark went from a weapons manufacturer who didn't care about anything but making money to basically a superhero over the span of 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So it's easily done. Like it's not overly complicated. There is some backstory there you'd have to explain with Magneto, but the overall gist of the backstory just needs to be that he's an extremist, right? Like that's really all he is. He was like the Mutant Liberation Front before the Mutant Liberation Front. So you basically say like that's it. That's really all he is. It's just a radical extremist who believes that like people want to take out mutants or whatever the case is, and like operates accordingly. And so you just throw that out there. The team faces off against him. Now, the one of the other takeaways is that while Magneto and the X-Men are introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because of the nature of Magneto and because he's so extreme, it puts mutants on the radar of humanity in a way that it wasn't there before. Basically, humanity starts to view mutants as a credible threat. And so what they end up doing is they basically start inducting and going through the process of initiating Project Wideawake. I love Project Wideawake. I love Project Wideawake. For those of you guys who don't know, this was a joint venture between like the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, like what is it? It was, oh my God, I've forgotten so many of the names now. It was Valerie Cooper, the president's advisor, I think. It was a whole host of people, like local local police, state sheriff's office, like almost every single intelligence and police, I guess law enforcement organization in the country was all basically tasked with finding a way to contain and control the mutant threat. Don't break the Constitution, but try to find a way to do it. Like, that's really all it was. And it was really, really cool because what it does is it sets the stage for the federal government being against the X-Men. Why does that matter? We'll get around to that when it comes to Avengers versus X-Men. So here we pick up with the final movie in Phase 5, Black Panther 3, Doom War. Now, here's the cool thing about this. Black Panther is, we got the first film. It was a resounding success. Everybody loves Black Panther. Black Panther 2 will be in Phase 4. Phase 5, given Part 3. The reason why I say this is Doom War is because we'll basically do what they did with Captain America 3 Civil War, where it was technically an Avengers movie, but it was called a Captain America film. You do the same thing here. Doom War was a story in Marvel Comics where Dr. Doom had come to the realization that vibranium had the ability to amplify magical energy. And so what he did is he basically, through some really, really shady channels, funded a coup d'etat in Wakanda. And the result was that I can't remember who it was that rose up, but the result was that this basically like grassroots organization, this grassroots political group had all the funding they needed from Dr. Doom, like arms, armament, all that kind of good stuff. They basically like rose up against Black Panther. They ousted him. Like he was injured in the process, which resulted in Shuri taking over the mantle of Black Panther. And that's why T'Challa becomes King of the Dead during Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, or during Hickman's Fantastic Four run. But basically what ends up happening is Dr. Doom basically sets up this great big huge distraction and removes T'Challa from Wakanda. What it does is that because T'Challa's not there, and because he is a credible threat to Dr. Doom, the result is that there's no one there to really protect the vibranium. Dr. Doom sneaks in, steals all the vibranium, and then leaves, and then basically like becomes like this super powerful guy. Now, there were some cool things that went on, like the Panther God Bass, like there were different tests to access the Great Mound of Wakanda, and one of them was that you had to address the Panther God Bass. And so where Dr. Doom did that, like he stripped himself down totally naked and basically entered into the spirit world and talked to Bass. If he failed the test, Bass would have killed him because he was basically powerless there. But he ended up telling Bass that, hey, look, like I really want to make the world a better place. It humanized Dr. Doom in a really, really cool way. And the result is that Bass basically agreed and then let him take all the vibranium. Now, this matters because what it would mean is that Dr. Doom becomes this hugely powerful guy. And it's a way to kind of pay tribute to one of the most popular villains in the history of Marvel. But what it also does is it brings together the New Avengers and the X-Men and the Fantastic Four because they all have to basically be a part of this conflict. It's the only real way to stop a guy with such extreme power. But one of the other really big takeaways from this is it brings Storm and Black Panther together. And so the result is that now you have a relationship forming between Storm and Black Panther. Now, following this, we go into Phase 6. Now, this is where things get a little bit dangerous here. what I would do is I would say, okay, for X-Men 2, we do God Loves, Man Kills. Now, you could do like some modified version of it, right? Like Disney's not gonna make an X-Men movie that opens up with like 2 kids being killed in a park and strung up. No, that's not gonna happen. Disney's gonna be like, not a chance. Like that's that's never gonna work. But you take the theme, the basis still remains the same. That now it's not really just the government that's against mutant population, it's humanity. Now I don't know if Disney would be willing to take like the nature of William Stryker, right? Like this radical fundamentalist Christian who believes that God wants him to kill mutants. Like I don't know if they would really take that, because the United States is like 80% Christian, right? So like Disney's gonna piss off all the Christians. So I don't know if that's really what Disney wants to do. Usually Disney doesn't really care. Disney's like, is it gonna make money? Then do it. And like, is it not gonna destroy our brand? Then do it. As long as it does not go against the nature of the mouse, Disney doesn't really seem to care that much. And so doing God Loves, Man Kills would be awesome, because what this does is in the aftermath of this, or during this conflict, something happens. Something big takes place, like somebody dies or some significant building is destroyed, something happens, and the result is that the government finally starts moving against the mutants and says like, we have to take them out. Well, you've got Sam Wilson, who is the new Captain America. Captain America's intertwined with the government. Sam Wilson and the new Avengers say, no, you guys stay hands off. We fought with them before. We're as close as anybody ever gets for friends. We will bring them in. That sets the stage with the Avengers showing up to confront the X-Men. Now, from there, you go into Captain Marvel 2. Who cares what the plot to this movie is? But the overall gist is that Carol Danvers is leading SWORD, right? Like the Sentient World Observation and Response Department. This is an organization that's like S.H.I.E.L.D., except it monitors space. But the reason why this matters is because what it does is it keeps her close to Earth. It keeps her within talking distance, so that the Avengers can call her in during the events of Avengers versus X-Men. And so from there, you pick up with Captain Britain. Now, Captain Britain will introduce the EDI, the European Defense Initiative, and it'll expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Those of you guys who don't know, in Marvel Comics, what you have is you have the Avengers, right? Like the Avengers in the main Marvel Universe, then you have the EDI. Now, technically, the EDI was Ultimate Universe, and the Avengers in the Ultimate Universe line of comics were called the Ultimates, but the principle still remains the same. The European Defense Initiative was Europe's response to the Avengers and basically trying to create their own superhero team. You had Captain Italy, Captain Britain, Captain France, so on and so forth. But what you do in this film, regardless of what the plot is you basically tie in their relationship with Colossus. And so what you would do is you would take the nature of the European Defense Initiative in the Ultimate Universe, and then you would grab Colossus from the main Marvel Universe, you would blend them together and throw them into the MCU. Why does that matter? Because in Marvel Comics, in the main Marvel Universe, when the Avengers were first formed, Russia wanted to have their own superhero team, which later on became known as the Winter Guard. But what Russia did is they went through and basically kidnapped every single person with superpowers that they could find, and then brought them in there and forced them to become part of the team. Colossus was supposed to be one of those guys, but Xavier showed up in the nick of time, right when Colossus was going to get captured, basically like shut down the mind of everybody, and then brought Colossus to the X-Men during Giant Size X-Men #1. That's how Colossus joins the X-Men team. And so what you do is you grab that and you throw it into the MCU and basically say, Colossus has friends in the EDI, even if he's part of the X-Men, because they were people he grew up with or something along those lines. Why does that matter? Because from there, we go from Captain Britain into Avengers versus X-Men. Now, how this whole thing, this really kind of builds on everything that we've seen so far, but Avengers versus X-Men, this takes place, the EDI is called in by Colossus to join the X-Men against the Avengers. And so again, I would do like Avengers versus X-Men as 2 parts. The result, it is May the 4th. Mariah sent me a text and said it's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. But nonetheless, you basically have Colossus that bolsters the ranks of the X-Men by calling in the EDI. From there, the Avengers call in Carol Danvers to basically bolster their numbers in order to face off against the X-Men. But the overall gist of Avengers versus X-Men would be the Avengers showing up saying, hey, look, we got to bring you guys in. Like, you guys have to come in. Like, nothing bad's going to happen to you, but like, we got to bring you guys in. The plot, I'm not 100% sure about. It is kind of thin. The Avengers are not X-Factor, right? Like, X-Factor was originally a team that consisted of the original 5 X-Men that were launched by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. When that line of comics essentially ended, that first volume with Luis and Walter Simonson ended, and the original 5 X-Men were rolled back into the main X-Men team, and then we got gold and blue teams. From there, like, X-Factor was relaunched as a government-sanctioned superhero team. And so that basically led into the events of I want to say I think it was Valerie Cooper who was the liaison originally, and then Forge took over and he became the liaison. But basically, you had like Valerie Cooper who ran X-Factor on behalf of the federal government, and then after her, you had Forge who ran X-Factor on behalf of the federal government. But regardless of the circumstance, while the Avengers aren't necessarily while the Avengers aren't necessarily a government superhero team, you could offer some explanation where the Avengers realize, like, you know, the mutants are not going to come willingly, and the government tries to take them forcefully. It could lead to like a huge conflict. So they show up there as more or less like humanitarians, like, hey, saying, look, you know, we came here because this is what the government's going to do. That does not need to happen. Just come in, answer some questions, we'll get stuff sorted out. And the mutants say no, and that leads to a battle between the new Avengers and the X-Men. Again, it's kind of thin, and there's definitely some work that would need to be done there in order to really get it together. But for the most part, in terms of leading up to Avengers versus X-Men, I think that works, and I think it actually comes together exceedingly well. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. I'm kind of curious. I love making videos like these, but let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. And with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end, and I will catch you all later. Peace.